Systemic racism. Yes, America, a systemically racist country. Don't you know? You hear it every time you turn around. I feel like such a chump for joining the military and defending a systemically racist country. What was I thinking? Who knew we were worse in South America in 1985? All right, being sarcastic. I don't believe any of that. But systemic racism, invoking it, that is the key to so much power. Now, before we get into the details of what's happening, I want to talk about a way to fight back, to push back against this insane narrative, false narrative. We try social media, we talk to our friends, but a lot of us are keeping our heads down right now. You know, social media, it all evaporates pretty quickly, right? It all goes away fast. You know what doesn't go away? A good old-fashioned letter, all right? A letter is, it's kind of special. It exists in the physical world. And when you write it and you send it to somebody, they do take notice. I know this. And they often respond. A letter, paper trail. Know what I mean? Everything else is just zeros and ones. And there's so many zeros and ones out there, it's hard to keep track, and things get deleted and overwritten. So I got myself a printer similar to this one at home, and I'm serious about this. I am going to be a prolific letter writer. This was the hard part, installing this thing. But now that I'm up and running, I already sent one, or actually I'm going to put this in the mail right after the show, and I'm sending it to the Academy of Motion Pictures after their ridiculous disaster of a show last night. Hey, it's more than a bad TV show. It's an American moment, or at least it should be. But so much of it was designed, I think, to make us feel bad. And that's really weird, because a lot of these people are talented. They're actually good at entertaining. Why are they suddenly not entertaining? Something's up. And I think, quite frankly, it's encapsulated in this moment, a little bit at least. There are political motives here, and also financial imperatives. Take a look at this. I think it sums up the night and the culture all at once.
Today, the police will kill 3 people. And tomorrow, the police will kill 3 people. And the day after that, the police will kill 3 people, because on average, the police in America every day kill 3 people, which amounts to about 1,000 people a year. And those people happen to disproportionately be black people. And, you know, James Baldwin once said, the most despicable thing a person can be is indifferent to other people's pain. And so I just ask that you please not be indifferent. Please don't be indifferent to our pain.
We'd like to thank Netflix.
All that emotion, all that virtue signaling, or maybe genuine pain, who knows? But then the commercialism. If you push one message, you get the Netflix deal. If you push the message of structural racism, you get political power, at least these days. Does that make sense? I think I'm onto something here. All of Hollywood suddenly not entertaining, and suddenly caring about not so much stories, but who's telling those stories. What do they look like? Is that really important to you and me? Where did this come from all of a sudden? I think it has a lot to do with politics. Joe Biden and his rise and the far left. Take a look at this.
Rooting out institutional racism? Black lives really do matter, but the problem is institutional racism in America.
The fact of the matter is, there is institutional racism in America.
The battle to achieve racial justice and root out systemic racism in this country.
We're going to finally root out systemic racism in this country.
There's systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul.
See, the thing is, Joe Biden's been around for a long time, never talked like this until a few years ago. Seriously, since 1973, when he entered the U.S. Senate to 2014, never talked about structural or institutional racism. But suddenly, it's the issue of the moment. It's everywhere. Why is that? I have some theories. We'll get to those down the road. But in the meantime, ordinary people are paying a very big price. If you can't speak about issues of race perfectly, if you make the slightest mistake, you could be canceled. And I'm not just talking about Hollywood entertainers and big-time news anchors, but ordinary folks. Take a look at these people. A seamstress, custodians, an accountant, a makeup artist, a bus driver, a cafeteria worker, baristas, teachers, of course, delivery truck drivers, and also, of course, cops. Meanwhile, there are some folks in society who can say whatever they want. They can go out and sing and rap about cops getting killed. And of course, Democrats, if they're powerful enough, can pretty much say anything.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
So this is the guy who's going to fix institutional, systemic racism. Joe Biden. You ain't black, Joe Biden. It's not going to work, is it? It's not a problem, actually, in my opinion. We're all missing the problem. But we talked about that last week. We'll talk about it again. In the meantime, I thought of something. I realized something. Joe Biden, former vice president. What about another former vice president, Walter Mondale? You know, he died last week. No funeral for Walter Mondale. Now, this is a big deal guy. Vice president under Jimmy Carter, ran for president as a Democrat nominee against Ronald Reagan, ambassador to Japan, and I think he entered the Senate again later in life. Big deal guy, served in the military. No funeral. No funeral. Now they're talking about maybe a memorial in September or something like that, but no funeral. COVID. Meanwhile, Daunte Wright, young man, unfortunately, his life taken away, just 20 years old. But Daunte was a criminal. Yet he had a state funeral. A state funeral. You saw this. Walter Mondale, a former vice president, does not get a funeral. But Daunte Wright, who is fond of hanging with his friends, with his weed and his weapons and his cash, he gets a state funeral. Daunte shouldn't have died. He also shouldn't have run from the cops. It's also not a huge surprise that he was on a collision course to meet the cops at some point in his young life. But you can't talk about those things, can you?
There is a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. If you do not speak its language, perform its rituals, recite its mantras, and follow its commandments, then you will be censored, banished, blacklisted, persecuted, and punished. It's not going to happen to us.
Just last July 4th, did you think he was exaggerating then? You know he wasn't by now. All right, I suggest you join me on this letter writing campaign. What do you say? They can prevent us from saying certain things on the internet, it looks like, but they can't prevent you from writing whatever you want in your own home and sending it to whomever you want.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.